Hello there, a very good morning and a warm welcome to the Sunday edition of your favorite political show. My name is Yusuf Ibrahim. It is Sunday, the 26th day of November 2017. It's been a very busy week, politically speaking. President Uhuru Kenyatta, or is it President-elect Uhuru Kenyatta spoke. Raila Odinga, the NASA leader, also spoke in Machakos, where NASA released some sort of, they made some major announcement, what they refer to as the Manzoni Declaration. We're going to talk about that in detail. Part of the declaration is that they're not going to recognize President Uhuru Kenyatta as a legitimate president. They have their own reasons. We're going to discuss that in detail. But preparations are underway to swear in President Uhuru Kenyatta on Tuesday. And it seems from the announcement from these two main protagonists, we might yet have another showdown on Tuesday. First, before I introduce our guest here in studio, let's listen into what some of the NASA leaders had to say over the week.
A month ago, we unveiled a three-pronged action plan for returning to constitutional democracy and the rule of law comprising of sustained civic action, economic boycotts, and the People's Assembly. We continue with the vigorous civic action, and we thank our supporters for their courage under fire. On Tuesday, we will celebrate the lives of 26 resistance heroes. The economic boycott is going strong and hurting the greedy dictatorship where it hurts most. We gathered here today to set in motion the third pillar, namely the People's Assembly. As we do so, we are cognizant that the People's Assembly is the subject of much debate, including misinformation. We take this opportunity to clarify that the People's Assembly, what the People's Assembly is and what it is not. The sovereignty of the people enshrined in our Constitution means that the people are the architects of the state.
Well, from that announcement there by NASA leaders, it seems the country is going to witness some sort of a parallel event on Tuesday, one by NASA and the other one, of course, by Jubilee and by extension, the government where President Uhuru Kenyatta is set to be sworn in. And this is what the Nairobi police boss had to say.
As we are talking, up to this moment, nobody at all has notified any of my station commanders about any other meeting on Tuesday. We are not aware about that. We have not been notified. So whoever thinks he has intention to do that, it does not involve police, he wants to break the law, why don't you tell that person that the law will deal with such a situation firmly?
Of course, Statehouse, the house on the hill, is busy preparing for Tuesday, a big day for President Uhuru Kenyatta there. Police have already indicated that NASA have not informed them of any kind of a rally or prayer meeting. So, are we going to witness a showdown? Only time will tell. For now, let's listen into some of the communications from the Statehouse.
All Kenyans have been invited to attend this function, and we expect the turnout to be in large numbers. Of course, we will try to ensure that people in Nairobi who are closer, they all flock to this field so that we can all participate in witnessing this very important occasion when we are having our president being sworn in. And as part of the arrangements, because we know people moving to this venue, it will be a bit hectic. And at the same time, because we'll be getting international visitors who have been also invited and who will be, attending this function, we will try to ensure the management of the traffic, and in particular, some of those roads where we expect our dignitaries to pass through are managed in a manner where it also doesn't create a challenge for our public. So we'll be going on the news from tomorrow so that people can know which are those roads so that they can ensure they organize themselves to avoid the particular roads that might not be in line with that day and the kind of a challenge we may receive. I want also to take this opportunity to indicate and to thank my team and to let you know that everything has been done to ensure the security during and even after has been put in place. Our agencies that are responsible for ensuring that security of our people, both in terms of their lives and in terms of their property, are protected. They have done everything and made all the preparations. So Kenyans should not have any reason to fear not to come for this function, because this is a historic occasion. It's an occasion that if you do not indeed attend and you have been invited, then you'll be missing the opportunity in your life that you may not be in the future be able to explain why you had to do that. So I do not want to go beyond that, but just to once again underscore, all Kenyans are invited. We have made all the arrangements. There will be entertainment, of course, during the occasion to make it colorful. And we would expect that our media, the Fourth Estate, can be able to highlight this to be a function that would put our nation in the global context on a higher, mapping perspective. So with that, unless there are some issues that perhaps you want to take up with me, I would say that is all for today.
Raring to go. That is the message you're getting there from Statehouse as they prepare to swear in President Uhuru Kenyatta on Tuesday. And last but not the least, the president-elect did not have very kind words for political analysts, asking them to involve more on development matters and stop politicking. We have a political analyst in the studio. I'm sure they're going to react to that. We have Dismas Mokua, the political risk analyst. We have Mark Bichache, political analyst. Hezbona Wheeler, who's also a political analyst, as well as Mutinda Kavemba. And joining us from our physical studio is Kakai Kisinja, a man who has experience, a wide experience when it comes to electoral matters, and is going to tell us more the process of swearing in, even as we await that swearing in of President Uhuru Kenyatta on Tuesday. Dismas, where can we begin from? The message from the president with regards to political analyst, or actually, let's begin from there.
Well, it's not easy to establish where President Kenyatta was coming from when he spoke about political analysts, but at least he has confirmed to all Kenyans that indeed he watches TV and probably doesn't like what every political analyst says. But when you look at the global picture of a political analysis, you're not supposed to make either political formation happy. So when you're doing your political analysis, you're not supposed to make NASA happy, you're not supposed to make Jubilee happy. So I suspect the president doesn't like the political analysts who call a spade and who do not make him happy. Maybe that's an issue we may need to discuss another day. But however, in my view, when you're doing political analysis, you're supposed to proactively support the public interest in whatever you are doing. And if you support the public interest, then you can go home, have a good night's sleep, knowing that you are serving Wanjiku. But the tragedy is, more often than not, when you support the public interest, you would be getting into trouble with the administration of the day. And I guess that's where President Kenyatta is coming from.
Mark, this is a president who says he no longer watches TV because of political analysts.
Well, the thing is, I found out about this when I was on set. So it played exactly 2 seconds before I had to speak. And it was kind of embarrassing because you almost wonder, what do you say after the head of state says that your job might be...
Interesting.
But the reality of the matter is this. We need to understand that political discourse as a nation does not necessarily mean that we are at loggerheads. This is the problem. The imagination is that if I take a side and Dismas takes a side, then after this we go and punch each other in the parking lot. That is not the reality. We need to understand that as a growing democracy, we need to be able to know that a country can exist where 2 or 3 or even 10 different ideals can exist in the same space. And if those ideals do not agree with yours, it is not necessarily a bad thing. And that's where we need to grow to, where political analysis is not about, you're not on my side, therefore I hate you, or you're on my side that I love have you. It has got to be, as Dismas has said, about a discourse that is honest, is intellectual, and is aimed at informing the public to make better decisions, not only about voting, but about their civil activism in between the voting period. What kind of things should they agitate for? Not just from their elected leaders, but also those leaders in opposition, those leaders who didn't make it, those leaders who hold influence over the society. So political analysis needs to become a real political analysis and not be considered by the public as a battle, almost like as if they're imaginary tanks in the studio fighting.
Hezbon, do you agree with the president, the political analyst should stop talking about politics and engage more on development?
Well, I would say that if you situate the whole thing broadly, you would understand that the president actually has a point. Why? Because you look at our socioeconomic spectrum and the political analysis that we've had, at least some of us have actually shot ourselves in the foot. Why? Because we've taken positions without recourse to the public interest, and to the extent that these positions then go and attack political formations and individuals, you may have a case. But ideally, from where I see it, political analysts occupy this space that in advanced democracies is called talk show democracy, and it is here to stay. It's not going to go away anytime soon. And because we are a very young democracy and we started the whole idea of democratic talk shows just recently, it is important that we take this as, a basis on which to evaluate what we do. Because from the platform that we are given, we are basically extension of journalists, and most political analysts actually come from a journalistic background. For instance, I'm a media trainer, so I don't come here and talk about things from a background that I don't understand.
Yes.
As a political communication scholar, I look at things from that perspective in the interest of the public. But still, as a journalist or as people who occupy a platform that is in the business of informing the public, public interest is paramount. But most importantly, I think there is need for political analysts to always strive to be accurate in what they are doing, fair in what they are doing, and of course balanced in their critique, because we have to talk about issues.
Well said, Hezbon. I'm sure you've responded well to the president there. And Kavemba,
yes,
finally.
I think I would want to probably understand where the president is coming from because of the sentiments he gave. Because you see, we are just coming from an election, and some of the political talk shows are actually a continuation of the political competition that was there before the election. And from where the president stands, we are done with that, and probably we need now to focus on, talk about how then do we now implement whatever agendas we've been having. And when you look at it from that angle, then you understand. And he's not the only one who's feeling that way, because in the same week, I think the governor of Kisumu actually banned demonstrations in Kisumu. Why then do you think? Because it's important to also understand where incumbents are and where non-incumbents are, because the president is now waiting to be sworn in to be an incumbent. The governor of Kisumu is already an incumbent. So the focus of the governor of Kisumu, for instance, just like I believe the focus with the president and many other
Did he ban political demonstrations?
Yes, he said that he doesn't want any more political demonstrations in Kisumu, that they're hurting people, that people are taking advantage, they agreed that political demonstrations should take place in Nairobi. Yeah, he said that. So I wanted to explain to you so that we don't make it...
That's a very interesting comment. I'm sure it will not go down well with NASA.
No, that's what I want to explain. And actually, the governor of Nairobi responded and said that Nairobi, we also need order, and that the governor of Kisumu should even apologize. In the same week, the governor of Nairobi actually compensated 49 people whose businesses were looted during the welcoming of Raila, and 200,000 to the one lady who was raped and who was still in hospital.
Did he mourn with those who were killed? These are two sides. Dismas, can you react to that very shortly?
Yeah. But Yusuf, it's important for us. Mr. Kavemba says he loves the Kenyan constitution. So he's alive to the fact that governors in Kenya have no capacity to ban demonstrations. All they can do is to give a statement of interest, just like any other Kenyan. And my understanding of Anyang' Nyong'o in Kisumu indicated that he's going to encourage demonstrations only organized by NASA, that he doesn't expect any other demonstrations. But most important, Yusuf, for the talk shows, they're very useful because it's only political analysts who've got the capacity to ask deep questions. For instance, you have members of the National Assembly, say, aligned to Jubilee. There are some issues they'd like to engage with President Kenyatta, but they fear President Kenyatta, they can't ask those questions. There are members in NASA who would like to ask Mr. Raila Odinga questions, but they fear asking those questions. Now, a political talk show like this gives Kenyans the opportunity to ask those questions without any fear. Because if you're in a Jubilee, you ask a question, the president is unhappy, then you go home. The same applies in NASA. But for us here as a talk show, you can call a spade and go home.
Well said. Now, allow me to go through some of the headlines here on both the Standard and the Sunday Nation. And let me begin with Kakai Kissinger, who is at our physical studio. Kakai, good morning. I'm sure you have a lot of experience when it comes to, of course, electoral matters. You are part of the team that saw in President Uhuru Kenyatta in his first term. And now on this splash, on the Sunday Standard this morning, they're talking about details of Uhuru's big day as Raila plans a move. They talked about the 384 million shillings set aside by the Treasury, provided, of course, to the assumption of office of the presiding committee to organize the swearing-in ceremony. And they've already added that President Uhuru Kenyatta will be sworn in on Tuesday. Now, Kakai, from your experience, do you think it's worth that amount, the inauguration?
Thank you very much for that question, and thank you for welcoming me here. Now, swearing-in process is a very expensive thing, because remember that the cost of swearing in of our president is negotiated and discussed by the Office of the Assumption Committee. There's a committee that normally is established under the Office of the Assumption of the Office of the President Act. Then there's a committee which is established, it's a 20-member committee that then negotiates on modalities and scales of how they will swear in the president. In one of the discussions in that committee, which is normally chaired by an appointed person, in that committee, they then discuss the logistics in terms of budget allocation. In discussing the logistics of budget allocation, they have to ask themselves one basic question: how many people are we going to invite? And in most cases, they'll invite former heads of either sitting heads of state or former heads of state or sitting prime ministers. Now, in this case, for example, in Kenya, they're going to invite quite a number of sitting heads of state. So that logistic of dealing with organizing and calling people from all over the world to come and participate in the swearing-in ceremony makes the budget extremely big. Because remember, one of the committee members there is the Minister of Foreign Affairs that will basically deal with issues of how many are we inviting, who are we calling in, the protocols, and all these kind of things. The cars are allocated to those dignitaries who are coming in. So yes, it could be a very expensive thing. And remember also there's issues of entertainment coming in there, and thereafter, after the swearing-in process, there's then the movement to Statehouse, because some people are going to be invited to Statehouse. So the logistics of it and the nightmare of coordinating all the heads of states to come into the country to participate in that, and also local dignitaries, it is quite mind-boggling that the figures could be very high.
Not a cheap affair. Dismiss. Already, we know that among foreign dignitaries expected, the President of Tanzania, Uganda, Burundi, Rwanda, South Sudan, also to attend as the Ethiopian Prime Minister. Those who have been accredited so far, 5,000 individuals, mainly from the Jubilee Party, and members of the public invited. Now, let me take you back to the figure, 384 million. Is it too high?
Well, one would be able to form an opinion till you look at the expenditure items. Like, for instance, what Kaka has indicated, that if you're having heads of state visiting Kenya, maybe you need to take care of their logistics. But it's a well-known fact that our public servants love this kind of events, because that's where they collect per diems and allowances. So I doubt whether a large chunk of this budget is actually going towards the actual logistics of receiving the guests who are coming. I mean, like for this entertainment, eventually at the end of the day, if we get the opportunity of auditing the expense account, you'll be very surprised. And one would have expected that during this time, when the economy is facing south, then you need a bit of, people to be cost conscious. But whatever it takes for us to make sure that the heads of states who are coming to Kenya, heads of delegations, they're comfortable, they come and witness the swearing in, that's what we must do. But what we must run away is this high appetite by a number of public servants to take advantage of every public event to make themselves rich.
Mark, do you think this is something that is going to offer some sort of fodder for the opposition? Because it's a subject that has been trending on social media for the better part of yesterday.
It's a difficult question to answer, and the very simple reason is this, that number one, this is a PR event for Kenya. What do I mean a PR event? First and foremost, you've got a lot of foreign dignitaries coming into your country. You need to put your best foot forward. You need to put on your best garment, roll out the red carpet for them, because later on you will need to negotiate with them various trade deals and things like that. And human beings are human beings. The sitting head of state, if he's treated well, when you come to visit his country, he will remember the treatment that you gave him, and that would influence the country. The second thing is, let's also remember, is that the media is going to be covering this. This will be covered on CNN, it will be covered on Al Jazeera. The whole world will be looking at Kenya, and we do want to make a good impression no matter what. Now, the question then becomes, is 384 million a good enough bill to pay? But the counter argument is this: to advertise on CNN, that scroll that goes there, you know, visit Malaysia, visit whoever, costs hundreds of millions already. So here we are with a free advertising platform where our country will be showcased across the world on one day. Is it worth the 384 million? I think so. But there is also the other side. The other side is not how much we're spending on this event, it's how much we spend as a country and on what we spend it for. That's a totally different argument and different conversation. Where as a country, we need to have our citizens equipped enough to know, for example, that our budget is in excess of 1.5 trillion Kenya shillings. So what is the value we get from that? That's the question we should really interrogate. But for me, 384 million for an advertisement for this country, and
it's fair enough.
It's fair enough.
Husband, do you agree with Mark?
I agree, and maybe we need to remind again the people who are criticizing political analysts that some of these things are unpacked here. I like what Mark has said, that this is a public spectacle that is going to market Kenya outside there. So looking at it from a communication point of view, I mean, you need to spend as much as you can, because the trickle-down effect is likely to be beneficial to even the people who don't understand that that money is actually going to do something that is much bigger than just the expenditure. Why? Because, again, we are getting international exposure in international media. So if we put in a mediocre extravaganza outside there, we will be calling to question so many things about this country. You look at an economy, it is dependent on the political structures, the media, and the economic structures. And I think this is a good platform to show the whole world that our democracy is maturing. If we divorce it from the political bickering that we have, to show the whole world that we have a vibrant economy, to show the whole world that we have a media that is capable of spurring the manufacturing and the economic sector. So anyone who is watching this would look at Kenya as a very good destination to invest in, because we have a vibrant media. The political system is a lot more vibrant. We are moving from one regime to another regime, though it's the same person who is taking over. So it's a spectacle that you need to invest in and look at the bigger picture. What are the trickle-down effects? To me, where I see it, the trickle-down effects are
I like how you've separated the politics of the day from the D-Day on Tuesday. I think we're going to have a very sober discussion today. Kavimba?
I want to second my two co-panelists that, looking at what it is we would want such an event to do for our country, then I don't think that is a lot of money to put into it. You remember just the other day we had the junior athletics, and you know what it did to market and showcase our country. And it would be foolhardy for anyone to question how much we used to them because of the kind of exposure we got. And like they've correctly said, that we even have bodies that are actually mandated to market the country and that have got much more bigger budget, but are not, probably don't end up being as effective as some of these events are in showcasing what we are all about.
Of course, details of Uhuru's big day as Raila plans move. There is the splash on the standard there. All our guests have talked about that. I'm going to engage Kakai Kisija more on, the process or what entails the swearing-in process. But before that, there's another juicy story on page 9 on the standard. Dismas, let me begin with you again. And it's all about NASA's leader, Raila. They're saying Raila's options as Uhuru settles for a second term. Questions linger. What next for the man who has been in politics for decades and has vied for the presidency for 4 times and lost? What is there on the table for him now?
Well, we've said times above number that you dismiss Raila at your own peril because he's got these capacity to metamorphosize and come up with new tricks. And he's been mute for a long time and created a lot of suspense. And this suspense is making every Kenyan nervous. People within his NASA circles are very nervous, and Jubilee is very nervous. But when you look at the People's Assembly, it can give you an indication of where he's going to. Now, when you have a People's Assembly formed at the constituency level, and their strategy is to have 3,000 people as members of a People's Assembly at every constituency level, that is going to be a nightmare for Jubilee. Jubilee should be disturbed that every single day you have about 3,000 people discussing Jubilee and saying that the Uhuru president is not, or rather Uhuru Kenyatta is not a legitimate president. And these 3,000 people, most of them, as you realize lately, they're actually fanatics. They're very irrational. Their thinking is not anchored on any reasoning. It's just emotional thinking. Now, when you have about 50% of the nation every single day receiving a message and discussing the President Kenyatta is not a legitimate president, then that's a source of concern. Now, agreeing with what my other panelists have said, there's a saying in the Western world that all sizzle, no steak. So what one would expect on a Tuesday, in as much as you're going to use about 400 million on color, and maybe for people who like watching TV news, when you have a big function, you send junior reporters to go and cover color, how people were dressed, the kind of shoes, whether they had happy socks. But the experienced reporters go and cover the actual content of the speech. So what one would expect for the president to do, outside the 400 million, which is going to be spent on balloons and maybe coffee and all these kind of things, is the content of that speech. Because the international investors in Kenya, or rather international investors, are seasoned. They're able to tell the difference between color and substance. So what they would be looking at is what President Kenyatta is going to be saying on Tuesday, the content of the speech. And now the content of the speech, so that I can join that point, the content of the speech should reflect on the People's Assembly. Because anybody wanting to invest in Kenya today, knowing very well that President Kenyatta has been sworn into office, is going to be looking at the political space. What is Raila Odinga thinking of? Because now we've seen that Raila Odinga has got the capacity to make Kenya a bit, to create a bit of trouble. So one would expect that President Kenyatta is going to respond to the People's Assembly and address those concerns.
So you expect the president to address that? Of course, we're going to talk more
the president must address that.
On your expectation from the president's speech on Tuesday. Mark, do you agree with Dismas that Jubilee should worry about, Raila Odinga and by extension NASA?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that there's definitely a perception and an issue there. No, because Raila is the kind of creature who, the more you concentrate on, the bigger he becomes. Actually, the mandate for Jubilee right now is to deliver on Raila's promises. That's all they need to do. In other words, Jubilee needs to take over the NASA issues, own them, and drive the country forward. Because what is happening now, if you look at it very carefully, it's a situation where there are real issues or imagined issues, and then these issues have been summed up in one person called Raila. Therefore, you can choose to focus on Raila, or you can choose to focus on the issue. Now, the beauty for me is if Jubilee begins to deal with the issues that Raila stands for, then Kenya benefits. That's what my take is, that as a country, we need to agree that if, for example, someone on the top of Mount Kenya feels that Kenya is too cold, and the other one at the bottom of Rift Valley feels Kenya is too low, then we need to work at coming to a balance, okay? Now, that's the real issue. How do we come to a balance and remove the power and the sting that NASA is depending on to move these people's assembly? That's the first thing. The second thing, you can only discuss things so far without executive or constitutional means to execute what you're discussing. So 3,000 people per constituency discussing what and to go where. At the end of the day, business has to happen. So that's why I'm saying I would not necessarily worry about it, because we have these conversations on social media every day.
Yes, and I'm going to get both Hesbon and Kavemba's reaction shortly, but for now we're going to take a very short break, but when we return, we're going to talk more about what the opposition is terming as the Manzoni Declaration. Of course, I've not forgotten Hesbon and Kavemba. You'll have your time shortly, but we're going to take a very short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back.